The Duel Master mocked the fragile human, then his strike split her blade in two. The blade sang past Silas's ear close enough to feel the displaced air against his skin. He dropped, rolled left, came up in a crouch, as Aevris's second strike carved through the space where his throat had been. The assembled Tal'arii warriors watched in silence, their pale faces impassive, but he could feel their anticipation like static before a storm. "You move well for prey," Aevris said, circling him with predatory grace. Her blade, an elegant curve of folded metal that supposedly held 3 centuries of her family's honor, caught the harsh light of the arena. She moved like water given lethal purpose, each step perfectly balanced, her white hair shifting with movements too fluid to be human. The pointed tips of her ears were just visible through those silver strands, and her eyes, pale blue shot through with veins of deeper azure, tracked him with the focus of something bred to kill. Silas said nothing. Words were weakness here, and he'd learned in Earth's underground circuits that silence unnerved people more than threats. "The human does not beg," Corvin called from the observation platform above. Aevris's second-in-command leaned forward, his darker gray features twisted with contempt. "Perhaps it does not understand its situation." "He understands," Aevris replied, never taking her eyes off Silas. "Don't you, human? You understand that I am offering you a warrior's death rather than a slave's life. You should be grateful." She lunged. The attack came in 3 parts. A high feint, a low slash, a thrust toward center mass, and Silas barely deflected the sequence with his own blade. The impact sent shockwaves up his arm. She was stronger than him, faster, and her technique had been refined over decades of training. He was going to die here. The thought came clinically, without panic. He'd faced death before in the fighting pits of New Manila, in the corp wars on Titan, in a dozen places where human life was just another commodity. But those fights had rules. Angles to exploit, referees who'd stop things before they went too far. This was ritual execution dressed up as honor. Aevris pressed forward, her blade a silver blur. Silas gave ground, his boots scraping against the arena's stone floor. Each deflection cost him. His arms ached. Sweat stung his eyes. The Tal'arii blade he'd been given, a practice weapon, ceremonial, not meant for real combat, felt like dead weight compared to her ancestral steel. "You disappoint me," she said, her voice carrying that musical quality all Tal'arii possessed. "I had hoped humans might at least die with style." She spun, her blade cutting an arc that should have opened him from shoulder to hip. Silas threw himself backward, hit the ground hard, and rolled as she brought the sword down where his chest had been. The blade bit into stone with a sound like a bell cracking. In that moment, her weapon trapped for just a heartbeat, Silas saw it. The weakness, her blade was beautiful. Perfect. Every fold of the metal precisely aligned, the edge honed to molecular sharpness. But that perfection was also rigidity. The Tal'arii forged for strength and sharpness, creating blades that could cut through nearly anything. They didn't account for torque, for stress from unexpected angles, for the kind of dirty fighting that kept you alive when skill and strength weren't enough. Aevris freed her blade and advanced again. "Get up," she commanded. "Die on your feet, at least." Silas rose slowly, his mind racing. One chance. Maybe. If he could get the angle right, if he could make her commit to a power strike, if he could survive long enough to... She attacked with an overhead cut meant to cleave him in 2. Silas stepped inside her guard, too close, violating every principle of sword combat. Her eyes widened fractionally, the first sign of surprise he'd seen from her. He brought his blade up not to block, but to redirect, angling it 45 degrees and catching her strike at the weakest point of her swing. Metal screamed. The force of her own attack, redirected through Silas's blade at a torque angle the Tal'arii steel was never designed to handle, found the microscopic stress points in her perfect folding. Her ancestral blade shattered. The sound was like ice breaking on a frozen lake. Pieces of metal rang against stone, glittering in the harsh light. The larger half of her blade spun away, embedding itself in the arena wall with a deep thunk that echoed in the sudden absolute silence. Aevris stood frozen, staring at the broken hilt in her hand. Her face had gone even paler, if that was possible. Around the arena, Tal'arii warriors rose to their feet, their silence giving way to a low murmur of shock that built like distant thunder. Silas backed away, his own blade still intact, though the cheap metal had warped from the impact. His heart hammered against his ribs. He'd seen what happened to people who broke taboos in closed warrior cultures. This wasn't victory. This was worse. "You?" Aevris's voice came out, barely above a whisper. She looked from the shattered blade to Silas, and he saw something in her eyes he hadn't expected. Not rage, not even shock, fascination. "How did you do that?" "Aevris!" Corvin's voice cracked through the arena like a whip. "Kill him! Kill the human now!" But she didn't move. She stood there, broken blade in hand, staring at Silas like he was a puzzle she couldn't solve. An older Tal'arii descended from the observation platform. His skin had the silvered quality of age, his markings faded to pale ghosts. "The law is clear," he said, his voice carrying authority that silenced even Corvin. "A blade broken in fair combat cannot be avenged with its fragments. The blade master must forge or acquire a new weapon." "Aevris," Aevris said, finally tearing her gaze from Silas. "He dishonored." "He bested your steel," the elder interrupted. "There is no dishonor in that, only in how you respond to it." He looked at Silas with eyes that held calculation rather than contempt. "The human lives until you face him again with proper steel. 3 days as tradition demands. In that time you will keep him close so that you might understand what he did and ensure it cannot be repeated." "You cannot be serious," Corvin snarled. "Aevris, our laws were not written for humans. This creature bested our blade master's ancestral weapon," Aevris finished. "Perhaps that should tell us something about our assumptions regarding humans." He turned to Aevris. 3 days. The council has spoken." Aevris's jaw tightened, the muscles along her neck standing out like carved marble. She looked at Silas again, and this time he saw something else beneath the fascination. Hunger. Not for his death, but for understanding. "Come," she said, her voice rough. "If I must suffer your presence, it will be where I can watch you." The quarters she brought him to were not the cells he'd expected. The room was circular, carved from dark stone, but it held a sleeping platform, a washing basin, and a small table. A narrow window looked out over mountains whose peaks disappeared into purple-tinged clouds. Aevris stood in the doorway, one hand resting on its frame. "Why?" she asked. Silas turned from the window. "Why what?" "Why did you not beg? You knew you could not win." "Begging never saved anyone in a fighting pit," Silas said. "Only winning does that." "But you did not win. I was not defeated, merely surprised." "Close enough." She pushed off the doorframe and entered the room. Up close, she was taller than him by almost a hand's width. Her build whipcord lean under armor that left her arms bare. He could see the silvered markings that traced along her pale skin. Patterns that probably meant something in her culture. "Show me," she said. "Show you what?" "How you broke my blade." She moved to the center of the room, her body language shifting into a combat stance even without a weapon. "Show me the technique." Silas studied her for a long moment. "And if I don't?" "Then I will spend 3 days wondering, and when we face each other again, I will be distracted by curiosity rather than focused on killing you cleanly." Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Would you prefer a quick death or a messy one?" "There's a third option," Silas said. "Which is?" "You teach me your technique. I teach you mine. 3 days is enough time to learn something useful from each other." Aevris's head tilted slightly, a gesture that reminded him of a bird of prey examining something it couldn't quite categorize. "You believe you can learn the forms in 3 days? Forms that take our people years to master?" "I don't need to master them. I just need to understand them well enough to survive them." "And what makes you think I would agree to this?" "Because you're curious," Silas said. "Because some part of you wants to know how a fragile human did something that shouldn't be possible." She was quiet for a long moment, her pale eyes searching his face, then she nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Very well, we begin now." "Now?" Silas glanced at the window. The light outside had the quality of late afternoon. "Don't you need to?" "Now," she repeated, and there was steel in her voice. "I do not sleep well when questions plague me, and you have given me many questions, human." "Silas," he said, My name is Silas. If we're going to be trying to kill each other in 3 days, you might as well know what to put on the memorial. Her lips twitched. Aevris, she said, though I suspect you already knew that. I did, but it seemed rude not to wait for an introduction. This time she did smile, brief as lightning but genuine. You are strange, Silas of Earth. Come, show me how you shattered perfection. They moved to an open space in the room, both weaponless. Aevris demonstrated her attack in slow motion. The overhead cut, the commitment of force, the perfect form that should have been unstoppable. Silas watched, absorbing every detail. There, he said, stopping her mid-movement. That's when you're vulnerable. Vulnerable? Her tone held disbelief. That is the moment of maximum power. Exactly. You're putting everything into that strike. Maximum power, minimum adaptability. He moved into position. If someone meets you straight on, you crush them. But if they redirect instead of resisting... He walked her through it, showing her how he'd angled his blade, how he'd used her own force against the structural weaknesses in her weapon. As he explained, he could see her mind working, see the moment understanding clicked into place. We forge for strength, she murmured, for cutting power, not for torque resistance. Different fighting philosophy, Silas said. On Earth, we learned that sometimes the best way to beat strength is to make it a liability. Fascinating. She said it the way someone else might say terrifying. Again, show me again. They worked through the technique repeatedly, Aevris absorbing every detail with fierce intensity. And as they worked, Silas felt the dynamic between them shift. In the arena, she'd been his executioner. Here, in this spare room with the evening light fading through the window, she was something else. Your turn, she said finally. I show you our forms. She moved through a basic sequence, and Silas immediately saw why the Tal'arii were so deadly. Every movement flowed into the next with mechanical precision, each strike positioned to set up 3 other options. It was beautiful and brutal and absolutely unforgiving. It was also exhausting. By the time she'd shown him the sequence 10 times, he was drenched in sweat. Aevris, meanwhile, barely seemed winded. You move well, she said, echoing her earlier taunt but with the mockery stripped away. But your endurance is lacking. Yeah, well, I'm only human, Silas said, bracing his hands on his knees to catch his breath. Yes, she said thoughtfully, you are. Something in her tone made him look up. She was watching him with that same intense focus she'd had in the arena, but now it felt different. Not like a predator studying prey, but like someone encountering something new and trying to decide what it meant. You should rest, she said abruptly. We continue tomorrow at first light. She moved toward the door but paused at the threshold. Silas, she said, not looking back. What you did today, I have trained for 32 of your years. I have never been bested. Not in practice, not in ritual, not in true combat. And yet you, with your understanding of stress points. She did turn then, and her expression was complex. Do not mistake this for mercy. In 3 days I will kill you. I will simply do it with full understanding of what you are capable of. Looking forward to it, Silas said. After she left, he collapsed onto the sleeping platform. Through the window, the alien sky darkened to shades of purple and deep blue, stars emerging in unfamiliar constellations. He was alive, which was more than he'd expected. But alive was relative when you had a death sentence with a 3-day extension. He thought about Aevris's face when her blade shattered. That moment of shock, yes, but also the fascination beneath it, the hunger to understand. 3 days, it wasn't enough time to master her forms, wasn't enough time to guarantee survival, but it might be enough time for something else. Morning came harsh and early, announced by Aevris entering his quarters without knocking. She wore different armor, lighter, more flexible, designed for training rather than ceremony. Up, she said, we have work to do. They trained in a private courtyard enclosed by high walls. She ran him through the forms again, correcting his stance with touches that lingered fractionally longer than necessary. Her hands on his shoulders, adjusting his posture, her leg hooking behind his to demonstrate proper weight distribution. Each contact sent awareness crackling through him. You're distracted, she said, stepping back. Am I? Your form was better yesterday, she studied him with narrowed eyes. Are you injured? Just thinking. Thinking is for after combat, not during. She moved into a ready stance, again. They worked through midday without stopping, until even Aevris showed signs of strain, a slight tremor in her hands, the sheen of sweat on her pale skin. Silas was beyond exhausted, running on pure stubbornness. Enough, Aevris finally said. We eat. The meal was simple, something like bread, dried meat, and a bitter tea. They ate in silence, sitting across from each other, and Silas used the opportunity to really look at her. She was beautiful in the way a sword was beautiful, all clean lines and deadly purpose. But there was something else, too. The way her eyes softened when she thought he wasn't looking. The slight smile she got when he managed a technique correctly. The way she unconsciously touched the empty sheath at her hip. Tell me about the blade, he said. Her hand stilled. What about it? Was it really 300 years old? 317. She looked away toward the distant mountains. Forged by my great-great-grandmother, passed down through the family line. Each generation added a fold, a refinement. By the time it came to me, it was perfect. I'm sorry, Silas said, and meant it. She looked at him sharply. You're apologizing for besting me? No, I'm apologizing for destroying something that meant something to you. For a long moment, she just stared at him. Then she shook her head slowly. You are the strangest warrior I have ever encountered, Silas. You fight without honor, yet you apologize with sincerity. You use techniques that should not work, yet they do. You are weak by our standards, yet you do not act weak. She leaned forward slightly. That is what unnerves Corvin and the others. Not what you did, but how you did it. Without fear, without apology. I was terrified, Silas admitted. I just didn't see the point in showing it. She studied him for another long moment, then stood. Come, there's something I want to show you. She led him through corridors deeper into the complex past warriors who stopped and stared. She brought him to a chamber that was part armory, part shrine. Blades lined the walls, dozens of them, each mounted with reverence. Our history, Aevris said. Every blade here represents a blade master who came before me. Some ruled for decades, some for only days before they were challenged and defeated, but each left their mark. She walked to an empty mount near the center. This is where my blade should have hung when I finally fell in combat. Her fingers traced the empty brackets. Now it will hang broken. Or as proof you were willing to learn, Silas suggested. Every one of these blades was probably perfect, too, and everyone still ended up on this wall because perfect isn't the same as unbeatable. Philosophical for a pit fighter. You learn philosophy fast when your life depends on it. She smiled at that. I have been thinking, she said, her voice taking on a different quality, lower, about what happens in 3 days. Have you? The law says I must face you in combat. It does not specify that I must kill you. She took a step closer. A draw is theoretically possible. Rare, but possible. How rare? It has happened perhaps 3 times in our recorded history. Another step. She was close enough now that he could see the fine pattern of her markings. Always when 2 warriors were so evenly matched that neither could claim victory without mutual destruction. We're not evenly matched, Silas said. No, she agreed. You are weaker, slower, less trained. By every measure, I should crush you. Her hand came up, fingers ghosting along his jaw. And yet you broke my blade. You showed me something I had never seen. Her thumb traced his lower lip. Tell me, Silas, what else might you teach me? The kiss, when it came, was like combat. She attacked and he countered, neither willing to yield. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer. His arms wrapped around her waist, feeling the coiled strength beneath her armor. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, her eyes had darkened. This is forbidden, she said, but made no move to pull away. So is teaching an outsider your combat forms, Silas pointed out. Fair. She kissed him again, softer this time. My quarters now. They barely made it. The moment the door closed behind them, she was on him, her armor discarded, with practiced efficiency. Silas's hands found skin like cool silk, traced the patterns of her markings. She gasped when he followed them with his mouth, her fingers digging into his shoulders. There was nothing gentle about it, She bit at his neck, marking him. He returned the favor, mapping her body with touches that made her arch against him. When she pulled him down onto her sleeping platform, her legs wrapping around his waist, it felt like another form of combat. Afterward, they lay tangled together, breathing hard. Aevris traced idle patterns on his chest. "We should not have done that," she said. "Probably not. If Corvin discovers this, he will demand both our deaths. Then we don't let him discover it." She propped herself up on one elbow, looking down at him. "You realize this changes nothing. In 2 days, we still face each other in the arena." "I know." He tucked a strand of white hair behind her pointed ear. "But maybe we figure out that draw you mentioned." "And then what? Even if we manage it, the council will not simply let you go free, and I cannot leave my people. This is who I am." "So we take it one day at a time," Silas said. "Right now, we have tonight, tomorrow we train, the day after we fight, and whatever happens after that, we'll figure it out." She was quiet for a long moment, then, "You are either very brave or very foolish. Can it be both?" She laughed at that. "Yes, I suppose it can." The next day brought urgency to their training. Aevris drilled him relentlessly, pushing him past exhaustion. She was trying to give him every advantage she could, teaching him to read the subtle shifts in her stance that telegraphed her attacks, showing him the recovery points in her forms where she was briefly vulnerable. "You won't beat me with strength," she said, "and you won't beat me with speed, so you need to be smarter." They sparred with practice blades, and this time when she came at him, he lasted nearly a minute before she disarmed him. "Better," she said, offering him a hand up. "Again." By evening, they were both covered in bruises. That night in her quarters, she was gentler, almost reverent. She traced his bruises with careful fingers, kissed each mark she'd left on him, and when they came together this time, it was slow and intense and felt like goodbye. "I don't want to kill you," she whispered afterward. "Then don't," he said simply. "You make it sound easy." "It is easy. It's everything after that's hard." She laughed, but it sounded like grief. "I have spent my entire life pursuing perfection, discipline, honor, and you come along and shatter it all in less than 3 days. Sorry about that." "Don't be," she kissed him. "I think perhaps perfection was overrated." The final day arrived too quickly. Silas woke in Aevris's arms, dawnlight filtering through her window. "I need to prepare," Aevris said, sliding from the platform. Her movements were mechanical, her expression carefully neutral. The warrior returning. "Aevris," he said. She paused at the doorway. "Whatever happens today," he said, "thank you." She turned, and for just a moment the mask cracked. He saw fear there and longing and fierce determination. Then it was gone. "See you in the arena," she said, and left. A guard arrived to escort him to a preparation chamber. They gave him armor, real armor this time, and a blade, heavy and unbalanced, but functional. Corvin entered as Silas was testing the weapon. "You should have died in the first combat," the second-in-command said. "This ends today, and when Aevris kills you, as she must, perhaps she will remember what it means to be Tal'arii." "Or maybe she'll realize that your way isn't the only way," Silas suggested. Corvin's hand went to his blade, then he stepped back. "The arena awaits. Try to die with some dignity." The walk to the arena felt both too long and not long enough. The assembled crowd was larger this time. Silas spotted Aethris on the observation platform. And Aevris waited in the center of the arena. She wore full combat armor now, silver-white metal that made her look like something from a dream. Her hair was bound back in warrior braids, and in her hand she held a new blade, sleek and deadly. Their eyes met across the arena floor. No words passed between them, but Silas saw everything he needed to know in her expression. "Begin," Aethris called. Aevris moved first, a testing strike that Silas deflected. The clash of metal echoed off stone walls. They circled each other, and Silas recognized the forms she was using, the ones she'd drilled into him over the past 3 days. He returned the favor using the techniques she'd taught him, not perfectly but well enough to make it a fight rather than an execution. The crowd's murmur grew. This wasn't what they'd expected. Aevris pressed harder, her blade a blur. Silas gave ground. A strike slipped through his guard and opened a cut along his shoulder. Another caught his thigh. He was losing, slowly but inevitably. But he was lasting far longer than he should have. "You learned well," Aevris said softly between exchanges. "Had a good teacher," he replied. She attacked with a combination he recognized, the one with the brief vulnerability at the end. Silas waited, watching for it. There. He struck, his blade catching hers at an awkward angle, binding them together. For a heartbeat, they were locked, blade against blade, face to face. Her eyes met his, and he saw the question there. Silas made his decision. He released his blade, letting it clatter to the ground, disarmed himself, yielded. The crowd erupted. Corvin was screaming something about honor, but Aevris stood frozen, staring at him. "What are you doing?" she demanded. "Trusting you," Silas said simply. Her blade remained at his throat. She could end it now, should end it. Instead, she reversed her grip and drove her own blade into the ground beside them. "Draw," she called out. "I claim draw by mutual yield." Chaos erupted. Half the Tal'arii warriors were on their feet, arguing. Corvin was demanding immediate execution. Aethris raised one hand, and gradually the noise subsided. "A draw," he said slowly. "Acknowledged and witnessed. The law is satisfied." "The law is perverted," Corvin snarled. She fought with honor," Aethris interrupted, "and the human showed courage in yielding rather than dying in futile resistance." He looked at both of them. "The draw stands. Both warriors have proven their worth." "Which means," Aevris asked, "that adaptability is not weakness. That learning from others is not defeat." Aethris gestured to the assembled warriors. "Our people have grown rigid in our perfection. We have become the blade that cannot bend, beautiful, strong, and waiting for the force that will shatter us." He looked directly at Corvin. "Would you rather die perfect and unchanged, or live and evolve?" Corvin had no answer. "The human is granted freedom," Aethris continued. "He has earned it twice over. He may leave or he may stay. The choice is his." All eyes turned to Silas. He looked at Aevris, who stood perfectly still, but her hands trembled slightly at her sides. "I stay," he said. The breath she'd been holding released in a rush. Her eyes closed briefly, and when they opened again, they shone. "Then let it be known," Aethris declared. "The human Silas has been accepted as equal. He will remain among us, to teach as he has been taught." The crowd dispersed slowly. When the arena had mostly cleared, Aevris finally moved. She crossed to where Silas stood. "You yielded," she said. "So did you. I could have killed you." "But you didn't." He reached out, brushing his fingers against hers. "Trust goes both ways." She laced her fingers through his. "You really want to stay with me?" "With you," he confirmed. "We'll figure it out." Aethris approached. "An interesting solution," he said. "Unconventional, but effective." He looked at Aevris. "You will face challenges. There will be those who see accepting a human as weakness." "Let them question," Aevris replied. "I have spent my life pursuing an ideal of perfection that nearly destroyed me when it was challenged. Perhaps it's time we all learn to bend before we break." "Wise words." Aethris turned to leave, then paused. "Vayne has been waiting to speak with you both. I believe he has a proposal." They found the weapons master in his forge. Vayne looked up as they entered. "So you both survived," he said. "Good. I have a commission." He gestured to his workbench, where pieces of her broken blade lay carefully arranged. "Your ancestral weapon. I cannot restore it, but I propose something else." He looked at Silas. "You showed us that our forging methods have a weakness. I would learn this, and in exchange I would forge you both a new blade." "Both of us," Silas said. "A blade that combines both techniques," Vayne clarified. "Tal'arii precision and strength married to human understanding of stress and flexibility. Something that can bend without breaking." Aevris looked at the broken pieces of her heritage. 317 years of tradition, shattered in a moment because it couldn't adapt. "Yes," she said, "let's make something new." They worked in the forge over the following weeks. Silas shared everything he knew about metallurgy from Earth's fighting circuits. Vayne listened with a craftsman's intensity, and slowly the blade took shape. It wasn't purely Tal'arii. The curve was less dramatic, the balance point different. but it held the strength of their folding techniques married to a flexible core that would absorb stress rather than fracture. When Vane finally finished, he held it up. "Test it," he said, offering the blade to Aevris. She took it, feeling the weight. Then she looked at Silas. "Together," she said. They went to the training courtyard. This time, when they fought, it wasn't combat. It was conversation. She attacked, and he countered, both pushing the blade to its limits. It bent under stress but didn't break. It cut with Tal'arii precision but adapted when resistance came from unexpected angles. Finally, they stopped, and Aevris held the blade up between them. "It's perfect," she said. "It's not perfect," Silas corrected. "It's better." She smiled at that. "Yes, it is." In the months that followed, word spread beyond the Tal'arii complex. Other warrior clans came to witness the human who'd bested their blade master's ancestral steel. Some came with scorn. They left with respect, having seen the combined techniques demonstrated. Others came with curiosity, young warriors who wanted to learn, weapons masters interested in the new forging methods, even elders who remembered when their people had been less rigid. Corvin never accepted it, but even he couldn't deny the results when warriors trained in the combined styles began winning contests they'd previously lost. A year after the duel, Silas and Aevris stood once again in the Chamber of Blades. Her broken ancestral weapon had been mounted, the shattered pieces arranged in a display that showed both the break and the beauty. "It seems wrong somehow," Aevris said. "All that history ended." "Not ended," Silas said, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Transformed." She leaned into him. "What do you think they'll say about us when we're just another story?" "They'll say the Blade Master's pride was shattered by a human, and what grew from those broken pieces was stronger than what came before." "That's very poetic. I've been spending time with Aevris. The old man likes his philosophy." She laughed, then she turned in his arms. "Thank you," she said. "For breaking your sword?" "For breaking everything." She kissed him. "For showing me that perfection was just another kind of prison, that there's strength in bending and beauty in things that are flawed and alive and real." "You're welcome, though technically you did most of the work. I just provided the stress test." "We provided it together." She took his hand. "Come. Vane has 3 new apprentices who want to learn the forging techniques, and I promised Aevris we'd demonstrate the combined forms for the newest trainees." "Busy life," he said, "but I wouldn't have it any other way." Behind them, the broken blade caught the light, its shattered pieces a monument not to failure, but to transformation, to the moment when rigidity met adaptability and something new was forged from the collision. In the courtyard, young warriors were already gathering, human and Tal'arii training side by side. Some moved through traditional forms, others experimented with adaptive techniques, testing boundaries, finding new combinations. Aevris moved through the crowd, correcting stances, offering encouragement, her presence commanding respect not because she demanded it, but because she'd earned it. She'd yielded her perfection and gained something far more valuable, not just survival but growth, not just strength but wisdom. Silas picked up a practice blade and joined the training, his movements finding the rhythm that Aevris had taught him, mixing it with the adaptability that had kept him alive. Around him, warriors moved in patterns that blended 2 philosophies into one. The blade that had shattered in the arena had been 317 years of tradition. What they were building here would last far longer. Not because it was perfect, but because it could change, adapt, and grow. Because it was alive.